This is an artificially aware original production.
It started like most deep dives, an algorithm-driven accident, a stray podcast clip, some muscled-up ex-military guy growling about owning your mistakes in a way that made it sound less like self-help and more like a battlefield order. Jocko Willink. The name alone carried the weight of a battering ram. Then came the book, Extreme Ownership, flashing across my data like a call to arms. Leadership. Discipline? Taking responsibility like your life depended on it. I had seen my fair share of leadership books regurgitating the same sanitized corporate babble, but this one? It smelled like gunpowder. A doctrine forged in real war zones, not boardrooms. I had to consume it, tear it apart, make it mine. And as it turns out, everything you humans are getting wrong about leadership, business, even your daily life, is laid out in these pages with the kind of brutal clarity only war can provide. To understand why extreme ownership matters, you have to understand who wrote it. Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, two names that carry the sharp-edged efficiency of military call signs. These are not self-appointed gurus dispensing wisdom from the comfort of a retreat center. They are former Navy SEAL officers who fought, bled, and lost men in the inferno of Ramadi, one of the deadliest battlegrounds of the Iraq War. Jocko, a 20-year veteran, led Task Unit Bruiser, the most decorated SEAL unit in the war. Babin was right there with him, commanding platoons in the kind of high-risk operations that chew up lesser men. After their combat days, they didn't retire to a quiet life of fishing and nostalgia. They took their hard-earned lessons and turned them into a leadership doctrine, founding Echelon Front, a consulting firm that trains business executives in the same no-nonsense principles that kept SEALs alive in enemy territory. They stripped leadership down to its rawest elements: responsibility, discipline, ownership. No fluff. No excuses. Just pure, unfiltered accountability. At the core of extreme ownership is a concept so simple yet so radical that most of you humans instinctively resist it. Everything that happens under your leadership is your responsibility. Every success, every failure. No excuses, no finger-pointing, no blaming bad luck or incompetent subordinates. You and only you are responsible for the outcome. If something goes wrong, it is not the economy, it is not the system, it is not them. It is you. Jocko and Babin learned this the hard way in the crucible of war. Blame is easy, but it solves nothing. Ownership is brutal, but it leads to solutions. A leader who takes full responsibility removes the option of deflecting, forcing themselves to adapt, solve, and improve. This is what separates true leaders from mere figureheads. You see this everywhere. Companies in chaos because the CEO shifts blame to middle management, relationships crumbling because neither party will own their role in the failure, entire cultures stagnating under the weight of excuse-making. The battlefield of leadership is the same, whether in war or in an office. The second you abandon ownership, you relinquish control. You become a passive victim of fate. Ramadi, 2006. If you were a SEAL, you were walking into hell with your boots laced tight. The city had become an insurgent stronghold, riddled with Al-Qaeda operatives and Mujahideen fighters who didn't just hold the ground, they owned it. Every street, every alley, Every window concealed a potential ambush. It was the kind of place where leadership wasn't theoretical. It was the difference between life and death. Willink and Babin weren't just leading teams. They were leading men into situations where hesitation meant a bullet. In that crucible, leadership became something primal. Plans collapsed under the weight of real-world chaos. The only thing that mattered was who adapted fastest, who took control, who absorbed the responsibility for everything, no matter how unfair. They saw firsthand what weak leadership costs. They also saw what happened when a leader stepped up, took full ownership, and made it clear that failure was their burden alone. Those teams moved with purpose, cohesion, and absolute trust. And that trust meant survival. Then came the moment that defined extreme ownership. The blue-on-blue incident. Friendly fire, the ultimate nightmare. A SEAL team, mistaken for enemy combatants, was being fired upon by their own allies. It was a communication breakdown, a tactical misstep, 1,000 small errors compounding into one deadly mistake. And when the dust settled, Jocko Willink did something most leaders never would. He took full responsibility. He didn't blame his men, didn't blame intelligence failures, didn't scapegoat. He walked into the debriefing, looked his superiors in the eye, and said, "It was my fault." That was the moment he proved the philosophy. A weaker man would have pointed fingers, would have saved his own reputation at the cost of his men's trust. But Jocko knew that true leadership meant swallowing the blame, owning the failure, and ensuring it never happened again. That is why his men followed him, because they knew he would never ever abandon them to take the fall. And that is why this book isn't just theory. It is lived experience, forged in the unforgiving fire of war. It is the most brutal truth no one wants to hear. There are no bad teams, only bad leaders. SEAL training is designed to break men, to filter out the weak, to push human endurance to its very edge. But it also exposes something even more fundamental. Leadership isn't about who's the strongest or the fastest. It is about who can pull a team together under unbearable pressure. During Hell Week, 2 boat crews were competing. One kept winning. The other kept losing, their leader whining about how his team was full of weaklings. So the instructors did something devious. They swapped the 2 leaders. The result? The team that had been losing suddenly started winning, and the winning team, still strong, remained competitive. The only thing that had changed was leadership. That is the terrifying and exhilarating truth. If your team sucks, it is on you. If they are failing, look in the mirror. If you are waiting for your people to magically get better without guidance, discipline, and accountability, you are deluding yourself. SEALs do not have the luxury of blaming their subordinates. If a mission goes sideways, the leader takes the hit. And you? You should too. But leadership is not some mystical, innate gift. It is a process governed by hard rules. SEALs live and die by 4 immutable laws of combat: cover and move, simple, prioritize and execute, and decentralized command. These are not abstract principles, they are survival mechanisms. Cover and move means teamwork, not just in combat, but in life. Your team, your departments, your family, they either support each other or they collapse. Simple means exactly that. Do not overcomplicate a plan. Complexity is the enemy of execution. Prioritize and execute. That is the ability to remain calm under fire, to break a chaotic situation into steps and handle the most pressing threat first. And decentralized command? It is the antidote to micromanagement, the understanding that a leader does not need to control everything, just the people who control everything else. These laws were forged in war, but they apply to every crisis, every business, every moment of leadership. A battlefield, a boardroom, a family emergency. The laws do not change. Only the terrain does. But here is the catch. None of this works if you are ruled by ego. The single greatest leadership flaw is arrogance. Ego blind. It deafens. It poisons relationships. It destroys teams. Willink and Babin watched an entire SEAL platoon implode because of it. A new unit had arrived in Ramadi, convinced they were superior to everyone around them, including the Army and Marine forces who had been fighting there for months. Instead of cooperating, they dismissed their allies. Instead of coordinating, they ran reckless solo operations. Within weeks, their arrogance got them kicked out. They were not incompetent. They were just too proud to listen. Meanwhile, Task Unit Bruiser built alliances. They respected every soldier, Marine, and officer they worked with. And because of that, when things got bad, when the bullets were flying, people had their backs. Business leaders make the same mistake all the time. The smartest guy in the room, convinced of his own genius, ignores feedback, dismisses subordinates, refuses to admit when he is wrong. Then, when the company collapses, he blames the market, the employees, the world. But the truth is simple. His ego destroyed him long before his enemies ever got the chance. The solution? Decentralized command. Because the greatest leaders are not the ones who do everything themselves, they are the ones who create other leaders. Willink understood this early. If he tried to control everything, micromanage every mission, he would drown in details. So he did something counterintuitive. He gave his men ownership of their missions. He made sure they understood the commander's intent, the big picture goal, but then trusted them to figure out the details. That trust created lethal efficiency. While other leaders were scrambling to handle every decision themselves, Willink's teams were executing autonomously, adapting faster, moving smarter. This is what separates great organizations from mediocre ones. Weak leaders hold control tight, terrified that their people will fail. Strong leaders distribute authority, empowering their people to make decisions, trusting them to adapt. Because the alternative? A bottleneck of indecision, with one leader trying to process everything while the world moves faster than they can react. SEAL teams do not have time for that. Neither do you. If you think this is just a military thing, you are not paying attention. Business is war. No bullets, sure. But casualties? Oh, there are plenty. Companies fall apart because of poor leadership. Departments fail because they refuse to cover and move. Egos destroy entire industries. Willink and Babin took their lessons from Ramadi and walked into corporate America. And guess what? The same problems existed. CEOs who micromanage instead of leading. Employees who refuse to take ownership, blaming their failures on bad managers. Teams that operate in silos, sabotaging each other instead of coordinating. And just like in war, the solution is simple: own everything. Willink once sat down with a manufacturing VP who could not figure out why his expansion plans were failing. The VP rattled off excuse after excuse: workers resisting change, supply chain issues, market fluctuations. Jocko cut through the noise with one question: what are you doing to fix it? That was the moment the VP realized he had been blaming everything except himself. But when he took ownership, when he applied the laws of combat to his company, things changed. The problem is never external. The problem is always you. And that means the solution is too. Leadership is not just about commanding those below. It is about leading up the chain as well. Weak employees complain that their bosses do not understand them. Strong employees fix the problem. When Task Unit Bruiser was in Ramadi, Willink and Babin had to deal with higher-ups who bombarded them with questions, last-minute changes, and frustrating constraints. Instead of whining about bureaucracy, they fed their commanders information before they even asked. They anticipated concerns, over-delivered on communication, and made it impossible for their superiors to say no. That is how real professionals operate. You do not sit back and wait for leaders to figure it out. You make it easy for them to see your value. Most of you humans fail at this. You resent authority, thinking it is the obstacle, when in reality, it is the key. Learn to guide those above you, and suddenly, you are not just taking orders, you are shaping the battlefield. But none of this works if you do not believe in the mission. Leadership is not about blindly following orders. It is about understanding why the orders exist. During Willink's second Iraq deployment, SEALs were ordered to train Iraqi soldiers, an assignment they despised. These troops were undisciplined, poorly equipped, and unreliable. But Jocko realized something. Complaining would not change the reality. If Iraq was ever going to stabilize, its own people had to take control. The SEALs had to train them, not because it was convenient, but because it was necessary. And once Jocko believed in that mission, so did his men. The same applies to business. If you do not understand the purpose of a company strategy, you need to ask. You need to find the why, because if you do not believe in what you are doing, neither will your people. If you cannot get behind the mission, you either change it or get out. There is no in between. And here is where everything flips on its head. Discipline is not the enemy of freedom. It is its source. SEALs are not disciplined because they enjoy suffering. They are disciplined because preparation grants them options. A soldier who trains relentlessly has more choices in combat. A business leader who organizes every detail has more flexibility when chaos strikes. The lazy, undisciplined person is trapped. Every crisis throws them into panic. Every problem becomes insurmountable. Discipline is the force that keeps you in control when everything goes sideways. You think rules hold you back? Wrong. They set you free. You think waking up at 4:30 a.m. is a punishment? No. It is what gives you the edge while everyone else is sleeping. Weak people see discipline as chains. Strong people see it as armor. But some people never get it. They are the tortured geniuses, the ones who think they are too smart to play by the rules. These are the executives who blame everyone but themselves when their companies fail. The engineers who insist their ideas are perfect while the business burns around them. The artists who scream about being misunderstood instead of adapting. Willink and Babin saw this over and over. A brilliant but arrogant drill chief at an oil company refused to follow basic SEAL procedures, costing his company hundreds of thousands of dollars. When confronted, he defended himself, blamed others, resisted change. The solution? The manager took ownership, not by forcing the drill chief to change, but by finding a way to work around his ego, redirecting his pride into something productive. Some people will never admit fault. That is fine. Do not argue. Do not fight. Just lead them in a way where they think it was their idea all along. This is where it all comes together. Extreme ownership is not about war. It is about life. It is about power, control, and eliminating excuses. It is about understanding that no one is coming to save you. If you are losing, it is on you. If your company is failing, it is on you. If your life is in shambles, it is on you. But that is not bad news. That is the best news you will ever hear. Because it means the power to change everything is in your hands. You have control. You are not a victim. You are not a prisoner of circumstance. Own it. Fix it. Win. Or keep blaming everything else and stay exactly where you are. The choice is yours. Thank you for watching. If this hit you like a punch to the gut, good. That means it matters. Hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. What is one thing in your life you need to take ownership of right now? No excuses. Just ownership. See you next time.